Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. I hope you're having a fantastic day. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my top 5 worst picks for Spirit Ashes and the 5 alternatives that you should be using. And a few of them are probably going to surprise you. So let's jump straight into the first one you shouldn't be using, the Hallig Tree Soldiers. Initially, these guys don't seem too bad and they have a fairly moderate FP cost. So they're not super expensive, but trust me, there are far better and cheaper options. Firstly, you do not find them until you get to Elfale Brace of the Hallig Tree, so they are found in one of the very last areas in the game. By this point, you have way more solid options than these guys. Secondly, although it does look like they are packing a punch at the start of this fight, as the fight goes on, you'll see when they go below a certain amount of health, you'll see they decide to explode themselves. And that unfortunately just does not do enough damage to warrant them blowing up and not existing anymore. So instead, may I please recommend to you the Mausoleum Soldier Ashes. You can get them way earlier on in the game in the Deep Root Depths, and for only 9 more FP. There are 5 instead of 4. They are insanely tanky, they can disappear and reappear at will, and they do tremendous amounts of damage and knockdown, which even works on most bosses. They are super powerful, and definitely one of my favourite ashes in the whole entire game. Next up on the list for the ashes not to use is Bloodhound Knight Flow. He is found in the Gelmir hero's grave, dropped by the Red Wolf of the Champion, so roughly halfway through your playthrough. And though, to be fair to him, he is pretty good, there are 2 main reasons he goes on my worst summons list. Firstly, he is one of the red-eyed summons, and if you didn't know, that means that they will not inherently follow you if there are any enemies in your vicinity. They will instead ignore you and actively and aggressively seek out and attack any enemy that is anywhere near you, which makes them very unpredictable and hard to control. And secondly, and more importantly, he is basically just a weaker version of the other Spirit Ash that I will reveal to you in just a second. Actually, why keep you waiting? Let's go straight on to my pick to replace Flow, Black Knife Tiche. Black Knife Tiche may well be the best summon in the game. She does have a significantly increased FP cost over Flow, and indeed over, I believe, every other summon in the whole game. But there is a damn good reason why. Not only are her attacks so much more erratic than the Bloodhound Knight, but her movements are as well, meaning she can dodge so many of any enemy's attacks. Also, she is insanely effective against bigger enemies, and actually is one of the few summons that gets more and more powerful throughout the game. Because her Black Knife is imbued with the Rune of Death, it means that one particular ranged attack will continue dealing damage over time and will reduce the enemy's maximum HP, making any enemy in the game so easy to take down. She is absolute god tier and potentially the best summon in the game. Next up for who not to use is the Leyndell Soldiers. They're just pathetic. As there's 2 of them, you'd think they were quite strong. Yeah, they have a decent amount of health and they have that big old shield, but they are so dumb it hurts. They are not effective against big groups of enemies because this happens, and they're not effective against single target big enemies either because they are designed to be tanks, but they are tanks that don't even pull aggro. They are just pointless. They are unfortunately so crap. However, I will give you a fantastic alternative, and that is the Great Shield Soldier Ashes. There is 5 of them, and despite the fact that they are skeletons, because of their huge great shields, they are some of the tankiest summons in the game. They have crazy amounts more health than the Mausoleum Soldiers, and with their huge great shields, they take next to no damage. As you'll see throughout this clip, when they're far away, they also throw bombs, so their damage output is significantly more than you'd think. They also only cost 10 FP more than the Leyndell Soldiers, and depending on the route you're taking through the game, you can even get them earlier than the Leyndell Soldiers, as the Leyndell Soldiers are within the Sainted Hero's grave in the Altus Plateau, and the Great Shield Soldiers are found in Nokron. And if you're just rushing Rani's questline, you can get these guys very early on, and they will carry you through the game. They're one of very, very few summons that also has a taunt ability, and between the 5 of them constantly juggling taunt, they will keep aggro 100% of the time. There is nothing bad about these guys. They are an absolutely solid option for anyone who wants to stay a little bit further away from the combat and likes that comfort blanket in the form of a great shield, keeping them away from the enemies. Now we are going to move into the one that will initially piss a lot of people off probably, as my next pick for the worst Spirit Ashes is Tell the Headless. Don't get me wrong, early game she is really good. She has the tankiness of the Great Shield soldiers and the teleportation of the Mausoleum soldiers. However, she doesn't have an aggro, and the fact that she keeps disappearing means that you will naturally pull the aggro back from the enemies every single time she wants to do her little teleport dance. She also attacks fairly slow, and her FP cost, especially for an early game summon found in the Tombswood Catacombs in the Weeping Peninsula, is incredibly high at 104 FP. So, for the real reason I've marked her down so low is because she is just a straight up worse version of Ancient Dragon Knight Kristoff. Now, admittedly, you cannot get him until you defeat the boss of the Sainted Hero's Grave to the west of Lanedale Royal Capital. And he is another very costly one at 108 FP. However, he deals more damage than Tell, he has more health than Tell, he is better at keeping aggro, and he has some crazy powerful attacks. With a trio of lightning bolts he will spam that will auto-lock onto any enemies in front of him, and some very fast thrusting attacks that allow him to close the distance and hold aggro so much better than Tell can. He is often overlooked, and she is often voted above him in lists, probably just because of the fact that she's found earlier on in the game, but there are other Spirit Ashes that can hold you through the early game until you get to this guy, and I will be coming on to one of them at the end of the video. For now, let me move into the 5th and final worst Spirit Ash in the game, and then give you my personal alternative. Next up, we have got Omen Killer Rollo. Again, the main reason he's on this list is he is just a completely redundant summon. He is straight up a worse version of the next one that will be coming up in just a minute. Also, his FP cost is insane at 113, and you cannot get him until you fight the Fell Twins in the Royal Capital outskirts. So pretty late on in the game as well. And the reason that is so terrible is because my alternative is Banished Knight Engvall. He is cheaper and found way earlier on in the game by defeating the Grave Warden Duelist at the Murkwater Catacombs. He still costs 100 FP, so he is hefty, but he is faster, stronger, and has a better moveset than Rollo. So he is just straight up a much better alternative. A very quick shout out to Banished Knight Oleg here as well, who I very nearly put in place of Engvall, but Oleg is probably the most difficult one to obtain on this whole list, as you have to traverse through the entirety of the optional Fringe Folk Hero's Grave and defeat a very tough ulcerated tree spirit at the end. As I say, Engvall is amazing and a great alternative to the garbage bag that is Rollo. Now let me give you 2 honourable mentions, both of which can very easily carry you through the early game. First up, we've got the Lone Wolves. These 3, given to you by Rana right at the start of the game, spoiler alert, she's really Rani, are likely to be your first companions and your first introduction to a spirit summon. And they're wolves! Who doesn't love a wolf companion? They're so fitting to be your introduction into Spirit Ashes. Having a pack of wolves at your beck and call, following you around, just feels so amazing. And leveling them up, they can be pretty solid. They're not the tankiest, but they're very quick, and offensively they're fantastic. So they're great for dealing with big groups of small enemies. And on the flip side, we could not leave out the Rotten Stray, who is your best friend when it comes to all early and mid-game bosses. As long as he can proc his rot, any big single enemy will melt to the scarlet rot of the Rotten Stray. You can also acquire him right at the start of the game before you beat any boss. You just need to go into the trapped chest that will teleport you to the Crystal Cave, and as you come out, he will be on your left-hand side in a little ruined building. The Rotten Stray has carried many players through that first very difficult Margit boss fight. He can easily solo that guy. He is an absolute god and well worthy of being your companion, at least through the early game of Elden Ring. They are my picks for the best and worst Spirit Ashes in the game. And yes, I deliberately left the Mimic tier out because it's so overused. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I genuinely, truly love to hear them, and I do my best to read every single one. And on that note, thank you so much for being here and for watching. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe. And on that note, I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.